Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, bots and girls, bots and goyles, girls and boys. Hi. I am happy to be here for the next reading in honor of the Community Poetry Open Mic Space that went on in North Austin for a long time, but was recently closed down due to the pandemic. And in light of that, I've kept the spirit of the open mic alive. The host of that open mic appreciated that. I still do this. And it is the first Wednesday of the month in the beginning of May, which is why you can see that I've got a floating picture of different photos of me and my husband because our wedding anniversary is just a couple of days, so I've got to be able to do this for my guy. But I'm going to share with you some poetry from the brand new issue of Down in the Dirt magazine, which is the May 2023 issue, volume 207, 207. What? That's a lot. Sure is. This is based on a poem based on accepted writing in the book. Is where we got the title. I Wrote This in the Dark. I Wrote This in the Dark is the name of this one. And so I thought a Grand Central Station shot with 11:30 time on the clock. You don't know if it's PM or AM. I wrote this in the dark, but this is the cover for Down in the Dirt magazine. I was going to share with you a number of poems from this one. I'm going to share with you, how many? 8. I'm going to share with you like 8, a lot of poems from this book for you guys. The first one I'm going to share was a poem that is not only in Down in the Dirt, I Wrote This in the Dark, but also in the Scars Publications book Twitterverse Periodic Table Poetry. And that is because people will often write things about elements, and when they do, I try to put in something that I have written about periodic table elements, and if it's a short one, it'll have a Twitter link, the one which appears in this book. This first poem is for the element sulfur, and it is titled Sulfur, Suddenly. Stepping through the 9/11 wreckage, I breathed. Suddenly, sulfur. In the papers, the fuel, the people, in the fire. The drywall disintegrated, supplying more sulfur, and I couldn't stop coughing, and I had to catch my breath. I was looking at this in the issue. The image actually appears in both of them. It is larger in this one. This is why I'm just showing it to you here. But it's so difficult to see that I'm going to see if I can show it to you on a larger screen. It'll be harder to see, but I'm going to try it. It'll be impossible, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is Sulfur Suddenly because it has wreckage from the 9/11 crash there that's going on at the same time. The beams sticking up in the air. Yeah, you heard me right. You heard me right. And so if you wanted to see it in color, you can see that online, but it exists in the books of not only Twitterverse Periodic Table Poetry, but also the brand new issue of Down in the Dirt magazine. I Wrote This in the Dark. But the next one I'm going to share with you is actually a poem because somebody had things that related to my bringing this up as a reference in the middle of the issue. It's a poem that's titled Fighting for Freedom on Christmas, and it was actually written for President George Washington's birthday, and it appears, I think that's the 22nd of February, maybe, and it actually appears in the event poetry book, every event in the year. There are so many events that there's actually 2 volumes. This is volume 1, January through June, and it is in this book as well as in I Wrote This in the Dark. So, not only is it in this book, check it out. It's also in Down in the Dirt as well. So I've got to find this for you. There is no image to go along with it, but it's going to be a good history lesson book for a poem for you. I hope you appreciate it. Fighting for Freedom on Christmas. When these guys got together and wrote the Declaration of Independence, the British Empire didn't roll over and say, "Oh, okay," and let the United States of America do whatever they wanted. Just because we signed a paper saying we chose to be free from Britain, paper didn't mean anything to the British Empire, so they were ready to fight to keep their hold on us in any way they could. So, yeah, Britain came to fight, but since they were an empire and all, they'd employ some of the Hessians from Germany to do some of the fighting there for them so they could cover all bases. After months fighting in 1776, George Washington's Continental Army was at a loss. It was approaching Christmas, and they stayed camped on the shores of the Delaware River in Pennsylvania. The Hessians, German mercenary soldiers from the British Empire, were all across the river at Trenton, New Jersey, which stopped the Americans, who were now out of munitions. So, on December 23rd, Washington brings over Hugh Mercer, a Scottish general, and Captain Alexander Hamilton. And he says, the Hessians are going to be drunk and reveling on Christmas night, so that is when we attack, when they least expect it. But Mercer explained, we don't have any munitions. Which is when Hamilton said, that's why we attack then, to get their munitions. Washington thinks, we have 5,000 troops. We'll cross the Delaware, that's 300 yards. We'll get through the ice and we'll fight the British, but only have their hired German army on Christmas strolling around. And the Hessians are celebrating Christmas, which is when separate U.S. ships set sail. Those stuck on Mercer's ship think, wait, there's too much snow. Well, let's go back. And all Hamilton could think was that we have to help Washington, even though others were on his boat balked, saying, there's too much snow, there's too much ice, it's just too cold. George Washington could only stress to everyone that we're crossing the Delaware River. There was no arguing with the man over this one. And maybe you've seen the painting of it, but it was much grimier and dirtier than that painting could ever portray. I mean, there were 60, 70 miles per hour winds. Icicles were hitting their boat made of cheap pine and probably barely holding up. And some of the soldiers had towels wrapped around their feet because they had no shoes. The Continental Army fought the ice and the snow to cross 300 yards of water to make it across the Delaware River. When they crossed, the sun had already rose. They knew that they were late, but that deadline was only in their minds. They survived hell. So by now, they could only think, let's do this. With that, they walked into Trenton, and they caught the entire Hessian army off guard. Washington ended up catching over 1,000 Hessians, and only 4 Continental Army troops died. And then they looked and they saw all the munitions, but added bonus, they also found a quarter stash of rum. Added bonus indeed, they thought. So they got really drunk on the rum and taking their Hessian prisoners back across the Delaware River. They would then, for falling over drunk, I mean falling off the boat drunk. So much for the Continental Army wearing towels or shoes, because at this point the Continental Army is drunk and freezing from their ice-filled river ride. So, despite the pain, know that this is George Washington's first major victory in the battle of his country, the country he would later lead as its first president, a man we emblazon on our dollar bills still. And now, we give so much credit to anyone elected as president, but think of the battles that George Washington had to fight to get to that point, which was only the beginning. It was the beginning of everything that would define not only George Washington, but also him as a fighter and a leader, and what we defined as this nation. Da, da, da. I got to share with you a poem that appears not only in Down the Dirt, I Wrote This in the Dark, but also one of the 2 volumes set every event of the year, poetry for events, all sorts of interesting things that poems are written for. This is volume 1 of it, for George Washington's birthday, which I think is February 22nd, I think I should remember these things, don't you? But what I'm going to do is, since I've been reading from those 2 books originally, events books and periodic table books, I thought I would share with you a number of poems that actually appear not only in Down in the Dirt magazine, but also in the brand new CyberWitNet book, Not a Scars Publications book, titled Testament. So this is Testament, and I am going to read from you. I think I might read 3 from one section of the book and 3 from another section of the book. I'll surprise you, because there are 4 parts in this book. First is all post-Roe v. Wade poetry, and the last section of the book has just 3 poems from Revelations, the last book of the New Testament. So it seems like a good fitting end for you. So these next 6 poems appear in not only this book, but also Down in the Dirt, I Wrote This in the Dark. Dun, dun, dun. So I hope you enjoy them. We're going with the Roe v. Wade poetry first, and I'm going to share with you a poem titled Kerning, Ballots, and Women's Rights. Do all of you know what kerning is? Well, you're going to learn it. You're going to learn it right now. Graphic artists with typesetting as one of their begrudgingly used tools don't expect to hear their jargon during women's rights court battles. But it's beginning to look a lot like Republicans will use any measure to stop women and all the people from fighting for their stolen rights. Here's the scoop. Approaching 750,000 people signed an abortion rights petition for a vote. But word spacing, a term that we graphic artists and typographers call kerning, is now the sticking point. Republicans claim that the reason this crucial issue can't be on the ballot is because of this. Really. Word spacing. That's the reason that you anti-abortion, anti-women's rights Republicans use, that there isn't enough liquor to drink that would make me believe that this is your true excuse. I mean, it's beginning to sound a lot like desperation on your part to stop your unfair edicts from being questioned by rationality. For it's beginning to feel a lot like tyranny, where there's a select few who make what they call laws to restrict the world. And we're supposed to just take it with no questions asked. Are we a dictatorship? Are we a self-perpetuating autocracy in which the working classes have no say? Well, the state of Michigan may try shrugging off the will of the people, but battles pushed to the courts. Emergency complaints were filed with the state Supreme Court. If type was unreadable, then why did so many read and sign the petition? The courts believed on the exact day I scribed these words that yes, the words were there and they should be read by all who have the right to vote. It's beginning to sound a lot like more of the same from people who don't have the evidence to support their argument. So they sing a song of a side story so that they can avoid talking about the real issue. Listen, we've been talking about it all along. You just haven't listened. Sorry, I like to get issuey. This is all from section 1 of the cyberwit.net book titled Testament. These 3 poems I'm going to be reading on post-Roe v. Wade poetry also appear in the Down in the Dirt May 2023 issue. This title, I Wrote This in the Dark. Dun, dun, dun. So it's in both of them. And I'm going to share with you 1, maybe 2 more in that subject for you. This next one is titled, I have to get the page open for it, Vote Changing, the System's Solution. It has been a year since siblings told me that they would never visit the state, which I'm afraid I now claim residence since they passed the worst anti-abortion laws. I keep stressing this isn't my home. I still vehemently say that this isn't my choice, but I still live here. What does that say about my now helplessness against the state? The saddest part about these laws, no, Wait, the saddest part is that so many women have to fight a battle that's so uphill that rock climbers and athletes couldn't stand a chance against this new and intrusive state. That's truly the saddest part. But the saddest part about these laws, especially for those who don't think they're directly, immediately affected by the restrictive passing of these laws, is that after fighting so long, you now read news about the 1 year anniversary of SB 8, limiting abortion rights. And the now swaying of Texas opinion is that well over half of Texans now strongly support abortion rights. After one long, arduous year, I see photos of Texas women in my now town marching, depicting signs of the Texas flag stating, "Don't mess with Texas women." And of course, the woman in the photo is just about the only one with her mask off, either to show her disgust for the restrictive law or because she can claim her 15 minutes of fame. This is a noble cause, but we've already been messed with. So then what? My isolation escalates as I read surveys suggesting a change is in the winds. But surveys and polls don't pass laws or overturn them. Like Queen Elizabeth II, who just passed away, I have never told people how to vote, though that's all any news article or report can talk about now. I have heard that independents or people who have voted Republican are now changing their mind this one time and voting for a Democrat, or if it only will give us women's rights. I won't tell you what to do. I never will, because I cannot tell you that the platform of one political party is worth changing your own vote over a single issue, even if the issue is life and death for women versus life and death for clumps of cells, which, wait a minute, don't understand or fathom life as we know it. You'd think it was a simple decision. You'd think it was cut and dry, and it should be. But when the cards are so stacked against women's rights, think again. It makes me wonder if voting for change is literally the only thing we can do. Do the signs and protests matter? Does anyone listen when our complaints and cries seem to fall on deaf ears? When backwards irrationality prevails, how does being the loudest voice on the street make an ounce of difference? If a person protests in the middle of a forest of people, does it make a sound to any lawmakers who choose to close their ears to reason? For how will they listen to the truth? I suppose it's a good thing that I'm living in Texas for this, not because I want to be in the middle of this battle, but when I'm in Illinois as a Chicagoan all my life, I probably wouldn't be fighting this as much as seeing all of this battle going on in fricking Texas as I'm seeing right now. But I'm going to share, because with you, another more Texas reference. This one is titled, sorry, I laugh at that. These are all toward the ends of the book for the Down in the Dirt issue that is titled, I wrote this in the dark, and is titled, ta-da, Eliminate All Rapists. After Texas's abortion laws last year made no excuses for rape, Republican Governor Greg Abbott assured his people by saying, Texas will eliminate all rapists from the streets. I'm sorry, Mr. Abbott, but what a narrow view. If you think all rapists are walking to the streets in search for their next random victim, I mean, people in clinics in your state will tell you that 8 out of 10 rapists are someone the woman knew, or whether or not you could keep the streets clean. The streets aren't the first place you should look. but to the men that these women once trusted. Eliminating all rapists is a wonderful idea, so saith this acquaintance rape workshop facilitator. But it's really a mystical, magical idea in the end, when the mentality of many men has to change before you law enforcement types can begin to climb this already uphill battle, eons in the making. For critics say Greg Abbott's statements seem to be detached from reality when sexual assault hotlines in Houston are going just as strong post-Texas rights removing and debilitating to women law passing versus before Abbott passed this to hurt women so. You can't win something terrible. You can't will something terrible like this away with a single press release or a public statement, especially when the only thing Texas has done to stop rape is to try to remove the backlog of rape test kits. Thanks for being on women's side once again, Governor. We should know that you'll take away our rights in one place. If you'll do that, your behavior won't change to help us ever. Anywhere. Whew. Heavy, heavy, heavy. But after that one, I have 3 in the back of this issue that are, in fact, you can see references to this Cyberwit book, Testament. They are actually the last 3 poems in Testament as well. They are short pieces for reflective of the last book of the New Testament. These are Revelation poems. This is Revelation 1, 1-4. Which are very appropriate when the first book is all about post-Roe v. Wade and women's rights poetry. Keep that in mind. These words were given unto me, and now I give them unto you. The more signs come, the more we see. So share these words with everyone, for all will soon know the true path. It has come to pass. I have done all I can. You bear record, the testimony of all I have witnessed, and more. The future belongs to every one of us. Blessed are all who heareth, who readeth these words. This is prophecy, and the time is at hand. Across this earth, people see and hear the blasphemy within a select few chosen to use their interpretation and force it down everyone's throats. The teaching of any philosophy includes doing no harm to others, though their arguments for harm to unborn cells ultimately harm living, breathing people, going against everything they claim to believe. So, know that whatever church you follow across this earth, even a church of one, grace be unto you and peace. For after learning the true path, know that even when still in conflict, your soul remains free. Your soul remains free. And then 2 more. This next one's just a little bit longer, but it's not long. This is Revelations 1, 5-8. I recently heard lyrics to an industrial song that said, "Embrace individuality and to reject conformity," which went right into the bridge with the crescendo, "Follow after me." This sounds a bit oxymoronic if you ask me. It's like, go to their concerts, be unique, but still dress like everyone else. And I get it. The hive mentality keeps the family together. It links people, gives everyone a perceived sense of comfort. But maybe what binds us, humankind, is that moral sense of right and wrong. Simple guidelines that don't require an iron fist to ensure the law, or a king, or a ruler. For the only thing that should ever rule over you is your mind. is logic, reason, things provable. And if you can't prove them, go with the evidence. Forget your fear of what happens to you after you die. Living your life now, morally, without fear, is your only answer. It seems far too simple, really. And maybe if people don't know any better, they think they need that iron fist to tell them what to do. But once you have learned, taught yourself, when you finally understand, you become your own priest, you become your own king, you become your own God. Then is when you finally realize that your mind has glory and dominion over ever and forever and ever. Amen. For even if horrible tribulations have befallen you, you know that you learned from every obstacle, because as much as you despise all that makes your earth wail, you know that without these things it would unravel the tapestry of your life, making you less complete from who you are right now. How can you grow without tribulation? How can you grow without suffering? How can you grow without love? With this understanding, you become the Almighty One as you learn, live, and grow. Amen. Okay, down to the last poem in the book, Revelations 1 to 11. And is also the last poem in Testament, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Revelations 1 to 11. Each and every one of us is the beginning and the end. Defined in Greek letters older than the New Testament. Let the gravity of these simple words rest in your soul until you realize that every single person can proclaim dominion over their body, that their life is their choice. Seest these things, others before you have come to this revelation. And as these words ring true for all living creatures, you may feel bound to write this in a book to spread across the land for all to know, except love. When you finally see the truth so vividly, so clearly, it seems almost impossible to keep the truth to yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was the last poem from the Down the Dirt book. I wrote this in the dark. It also happened to be the last poem that appears in the cyberwit.net book titled Testament. Thank you all for listening. I will come back with a couple more readings in honor of this reading space time for community poetry. And stay safe, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.